Please welcome our next speakers and Doug Meetup leader, Lone Gru and Ulrika Stenervik. Today, they will be presenting their session, Expense Management in Action. Please stick around after Lone and Ulrika's session for a live Q&A.
So, welcome to this journey of expense management in action. On the right-hand side of the picture, you see the Swedish Viking Ulrika. Ulrika is very passionate about Dynamics, which she works with every day at her job in Capgemini. She is a finance enthusiast, and she's also my best finance friend forever, BFFF, who is always by my side when I need it. So thank you so much for that, Ulrika. I look forward to doing this session with you and a lot of sessions more. Over to you, Ulrika.
Oh, thank you so much. So you see Lone, she is on the left-hand side of this picture. She is actually one that I've been working with for several years. And she is one that always has the customer's best interest in mind, especially when it comes to Dynamics and how to get the best out of their value of that Dynamics investment. She works at Arneo, and we really look forward to doing this session with you today. Today, we will talk about something that we see in the system being somewhat of a hidden gem. Normally, when it comes to expense management, it's something that takes time in the organization. It's a burden. And many of the employees think that it's really not giving them very much value. So we want to have a way of making it easier for them. And that's why we have the expense management solution. It also approves, automates the approval process and reduces the administration for the ones working in human resource. But Lone, couldn't you tell me a little bit more about when you worked with this at the customer site?
Yes, so the first time I used expense management in Dynamics myself, the system was actually called AX. So it was AX12. We already have the expense management since then. We used it at Vestas, where I worked in Denmark, the offshore wind turbines. It was a company of 5,000 employees. And we did all our expenses in expense management in Dynamics. Ulrika, I'm sure you also tried using Dynamics expense management.
I actually did at my prior employer, which was actually Microsoft. We used, and every one of my colleagues, we used the expense management module for doing our expense reports. So it works also with really large enterprise companies with expense management. But we will see how easy it is to set up when we look through the coming slides. So for today, we have some great topics for you. We have the setup steps and then some presentation topics. So we'll go through what you need to do with your employees, your categories, your policies and workflows, how to address payment methods, and credit card integrations, and then a lot of things on the optional setup as well. Then we'll end up by looking at the mobile app and some expense reports within Dynamics. So let's get started. First of all, you need to set up your employees. An employee must also be linked to a user. And if you're linked to an employee, then you can also link that employee to a vendor. This way, it makes your payment process to the employees really smooth.
That's nice, Ulrika. Do you mean then that I can create normal vendor payments when I reimburse my employees?
Exactly that, Lone. So with the normal vendor payment process, which you can also automate, you make sure that you reimburse all of your employees in time. So let's have a look at what you need to do then to make this work. Well, first of all, when you go into Dynamics, you look at the user setup. So going in here, looking at the setup of the users, I have myself as an example. And here you can see that I'm set up as a user. Here you set the roles, etc. But I am interested in the link to the person. And the person is the person that you set up in the HR module. That person is an employee. So if I go here and look at the employee setup, don't forget to also set up the information on the employee regarding the financial dimensions. So all of the expenses get tagged with the correct financial dimensions, such as cost center and department. Once that's done, go to the expense management tab and link your employee to a vendor by pressing the link here. And here I have pre-made a vendor with my name on it. Choosing that one will make it super smooth to reimburse your employees when they're set up as vendors in the system. But Leone, over to you. Tell them more about the categories.
Yes, I must say though, Ulrika, I really like that we can get the financial dimensions inside with the expense reports, because that's not doable in every system. But yes, over to the categories and the subcategories. So why do we need categories? In finance, of course, we like to look at how we spend our money. That's one reason. It could also be that there are different rules and different possibilities for the different categories. That's another reason that we will come back to later. Let's look into the system. So I created a to-do for myself to make sure I'm going to show you how to do the expense categories and look at the expense categories. So I go in on my front page on my to-do with the expense categories. I have a task link directly to the expense categories. And here you can see the categories set up in my system here. I have car rental, entertain, flight, and so on. The one I want to look into a little is the hotel. So for the categories, we have an ID, a name. You can decide if you want to use it in project. We have a default payment method. We can use itemizations, which we are coming back to. We can also say if we want to inactivate the category. Let's say we don't want to use the category any longer. Someone decided we want to do different. So what is also, you could create different payment methods because you don't always pay cash or credit card. So you could create different methods for how you are paying. If we look on to the subcategories here, these are used for the itemization. So let's look here at my subcategories. These are extremely important for us in finance because if you get a hotel bill, there could be different options on the hotel bill or different lines on the hotel bill. One is the room rate, one is how much you have eaten, room service, minibar, and so on. These could belong to different accounts, and it could also be different item sales tax groups. So that's some of the reasons. Ulrika, I know that you have also created something about the policies. Do you want to move on with that?
Absolutely, Lona. But first of all, with the itemization, is it possible to add a receipt there as well?
Yes, you can add receipts to subcategories to each line that you enter. It's really a nice feature, making it a lot easier also for finance to go through it all or just to approve for the approver. Yes.
Oh, great. And if you have any questions listening in, please put them in the chat. Well, I will tell you some more about the policies. Policies, you can say, are rules that you set up in the system. And when you set them up, you also define what you need to do when an employee hits one of these rules. So it could be one of three types. You can get a warning out. You can get an error, which means that there is a hard stop. Or you can get a message saying that you need to add a justification, a reason to why this happens. So these policies or rules could be things like setting up that the maximum amount for a hotel night is $200 or $500. Once you reach that target and go above it, then you can have the system telling you, okay, now I get a warning or an error. So those are the policies. But I will show you a little bit on how you set them up in the system. So if we proceed.
Yeah, Ulrika, I have a question before that. Can you set them up? Do you need to set them up for each legal entity? Because I'm kind of lazy.
Leona, of course you don't have to do that. It's Dynamics. So since it's Dynamics, we can do them cross-company. And actually, if you use intercompany expenses, which we will talk about, you can use some great features there as well. But here you see the policies when we set them up. I choose one, do it for just this legal entity, but it could have been more. I go in and I have a look at this one to say, well, if I have a flight that is over 2,000 euros, then I will actually get the hard stop in the system. With that, I set up my policies, and it could have been multiple different rules for the policies, but just to show you. Then I add a new expense, use the flight category, put in an amount that is higher than the 2,000 policy rule, and save it. With that, I get an error out. So this really simplifies the work of checking things and administrating things for the HR department.
Before we move on, Ulrika, what did you say about the intercompany?
Well, with the intercompany, Lona, it's actually possible to set up these rules. So because intercompany, I can put in an expense report on behalf of another legal company, and then I can actually have the policies for the borrowing legal entity to be assigned to that expense. But over to you, Lona, and tell us a little bit more about the workflows.
Yes, and before I move on with the workflows, just mentioning again, feel free to put your questions in the chat. The policies is an interesting topic actually to work with. So the system comes with the predefined workflows that are already built. You can choose to use them as you want, or you can predefine them, or you can define them according to your needs. There are different examples. One is the expense report approval, where you just approve an entire expense report. Then we have the expense line approval. I will get back to that one soon. Then we have the travel requisition approval. Ulrika will tell you a little about travel requisitions later, and also the cash advance request, which she will also show us in the system. If those workflows that are in the system are not enough, then of course Dynamics comes with the possibility of using Power Automate to build your own flows. But let's try to look at what I mentioned about the expense line approval. So when you send something in approval, you have some reviewers. You could set up dynamic reviewers, meaning if you are a company working with projects, then you might have a project manager, and you might want the project manager to approve the expense before it's moving on to the line approval to your manager. It might also be that you have financial dimensions, like for example, a cost center, and you have a cost center owner. Maybe you want that cost center owner to approve before you move on to the manager approval. These steps are possible in the system, and it's very easy to set it up because the hierarchy is already in the system. So, yeah, what do you think, Ulrika?
It looks great, but could I also review cross-company if I have people hired both in Sweden and in Denmark, for instance?
You definitely can do. And an example of that is also when I worked at Vestas, our IT managers approved for different employees across different countries and different legal entities. And they just went to one page where all the approvals were and then had to approve from there. So it's nice, easy, and convenient. Let's move on to the payment methods here. So once an employee is going on a trip, they might be using cash or they might be using credit cards. Some companies have more than one credit card. And that's why we set up the payment methods. The typical payment methods are cash and credit card, different credit cards, and the credit card transactions can be imported manually into the system as you wish on the time you want to do it. But we could also set up an automated import to import the credit card transactions, which could be done every night. So every morning when you step in, Ulrika, your expenses would be ready to do. And you get a reminder that you have now new expenses to do. This is really convenient. It saves time in finance because you don't have to reconciliate as much because the transactions are already being sent into the system. So,
yeah, that really sounds like the burden of doing expense reports is almost not there any longer.
No, it's very, very easy compared to how we did it previously. So let's move on to the last setups. We have a lot of optional setups that is possible.
Let's look at the optional setup that we have in the system. We have, first of all, both the purpose and the travel locations. Those are meant to make things easier for your employees when creating an expense report. So add values to those lists and your employees will thank you. Then we have the delegates. Imagine that you're a senior manager. Maybe you have someone helping you out with doing your expense reports. Well, then you can use the delegates and delegate that work to someone else.
Can I have a question here, Ulrika?
Of course.
Can I delegate when I'm on vacation just for a short period because I don't want to get back to so many approvals to do?
Yes, you could. You can set a time span with a to and a from date. And if you, like Lone, have questions, put them in the chat and we'll take them afterwards. So then we also have the intercompany expenses. I can do an expense on behalf of another legal entity. So maybe the hotel cost was not something that should hit the legal entity where I work. Then I can actually automatically post it to another legal entity that will create two transactions, one in the company where I am situated and one in the company that should actually have the cost. Super good capability to make work with expenses so much easier. Then, if you're working with the project module in Dynamics, well, then I think that the project expenses is almost a must. It's so easy to map your expenses to the correct project just by a lookup. And then you ensure that you always have the right cost in your projects. Well, we also have set up when it comes to the travel requisitions and cash advances. And a travel requisition is something where I send in a request of going on a trip. I define the expenses that I think will occur with the value linked to a category and then send them off to approval. Once they are approved, then I can go ahead and link it to an actual travel expense. And if I don't have the cash to go on that trip, I can actually also ask for a cash advance that could be paid out beforehand and then deducted from whatever my final expense report says. The two final things I want to mention on this slide is the per diems and the mileage. Per diems are allowances that you get paid out for being on a business trip. The rules for per diems, it's very local. But here in Dynamics, you have the possibility to set it up the way it fits your legal entity and your company. You can set the to and from the times and also say this if it was the start traveling day or the last of the travels. So you have great possibilities here. And then finally, the mileage. So you get reimbursed for doing travels with your company car or with your personal car. And then you set up mileage to track the mileage or the kilometers that you actually use the car for. But Lone, don't you have something special there in Denmark?
I've been waiting for you to talk about that one, Ulrika. Yes, we do. For the first 20,000 kilometers in Denmark, we get 1 pay per kilometer, and we can set the system up to count how many kilometers we have gotten pay for, and then automatically it changes to the next amount. It's really, really nice and easy to do, and we don't have people sitting there calculating how many kilometers they got paid out. That's so convenient and so easy. So, do you want to show some of it in the system, Ulrika?
Why not? I guess that's why they're here. So let's hit it off and see how this works in the system. We start off by the things that will make things easier for your employees. So the list of purposes, fill it out, and then it's easy to choose one when you do your expense report. Same thing goes for the locations, add them, and your employees will thank you. Then we have the merchants. Don't forget this one. It's super important to have statistics on what you buy from certain vendors. With this, you can map your expenses towards specific vendors. And now I want to show you how to do a travel requisition. So first of all, since I'm a Viking, I go on a raid. I go to Lindisfarne. And for those of you who don't know Lindisfarne, put it in the chat and we can talk about that in the end. Once I've given a description to my travel requisition, I'm actually going to seek new territory. I actually then add also lines for what kind of cost that will occur. Here it's hotel. I think it will occur by the 30th and the estimated amount. In this case, $200. Then I put in a second line because I also need some taxi. Well, I guess the Vikings didn't use that one, but I will. So the same date and $50 for taxi. Now remember this $50. I will submit my travel requisition, pushing it through to the head Viking to approve, which is something that he will get, and then approve like this. And once my travel requisition actually is approved, and I guess here it will pass a few days, I'll been out, I've done my raid, I come back, and now I actually do my actual expense report. And when I do my actual expense report, like this, putting again in the purpose, you should see I should have pre-populated with RAID as well. Now here, I can actually link it to my travel requisition, say okay. And then the nice thing about this is when I try to put in the taxi that you remember, I requested 50, but now it actually turned out it was 60. I actually get a message in the system saying that this is not approved due to that it's actually above the travel request that I put in. So now I need to change that. So Lona, this is the setup and the way that it works with travel requisitions in the system. Could you tell us a bit more about the Power BI parts?
Definitely, but let me first mention how good it looked when you chose the travel requisition and the financial dimensions also populated, Ulrika. That was nice. Nice feature.
Oh, you see, you should set up your employees correctly. Then it works out perfectly.
That's what we need to do. Good. So let's move on to looking at some embedded Power BI in the system. We have two different Power BI dashboards that is coming as part of the system. We have the personal dashboard where Ulrika and I can go in and watch how much money did we spend on our last rate, and did we spend them on eating, on drinking, on sleeping, or what did we spend them on? Then we have the admin dashboard. The admin dashboard is the one that the managers and also the people in finance are looking at. And let's try to jump into the system and look what we can see. Again, in the system, as you see, I created a to-do for me. If I don't create to-dos, I never get things done. So I have a task list here with the expense management. You can see on top there are two different analytics to be shown. One is the admin, the other one is the personal analytics. But we just decided we are going to look at the admin analytics. You can see Power BI is opening here. In the bottom, we have 3 different sheets: employee overview, no expense overview, employee statistics, and an employee comparison. You can also see, we can see the approved, the draft, the in review, or the rejected expense reports. So it's possible to drill down and see the different expense reports, how far they are. Is there anything we need to make people, push people to do because they are only in draft? We have a lot of expense reports in draft, I see. We can see also the top 5 merchants here, which will be Alaska Air Group, Hilton, and so on. We also, on the top, as you can see, we see the different cost types, the 5 top cost categories, which is then hotel for the first one, flight, and meals, which might be very normal. We also see the top 5 spending employees here. So we have 2 employees who spend a lot more than the others. We do then have the possibility of looking into that. But let me just mention, if you do put the budget in the system, you can also look at the budget compared to the actuals here. So really nice. Julia Vonderberg, an employee who spent a lot of money, and we want to look a little into what she spent them on. We can see her expense reports based on cost types. We can see how much she spent on personal expenses. We can decide which dates do we want to seek out. And we can look at the different cost types. So how much did she spend on hotel? We can see the different expense reports where hotel was a part of it to drill down into it. If we press one of them, we get to the voucher. But now let's try to look at a comparison. No, we are comparing 2 people here, but let's also look in the bottom before we seek these out, that we do have a timeline here where we see how much we spent. Might be you want to look into that one because that looks a little interesting. So let's look at our 2 top spenders. Julia was one of them, and Tiro was the other one. You can see one spent 8,000, the other one spent 5.9. And we then have the possibility of looking into how much do they have already approved. Julia actually doesn't have a lot. How much in draft? Julia has a lot that is in draft. We might want to push her to do those. And so like that, we can watch and follow all the expenses, look at the cost types they used, and follow everything month for month. What do you think, Ulrika?
Well, it looks like it's a lot of work for setting this up, actually, Lona. But, the outcome is great. Is it hard to set it up?
Ulrika, it comes out of the box. You don't have to do anything. As soon as you start doing your expenses, it will automatically be there for you in the system to look at. You can even change it if you want to. So there's the possibility of editing the Power BI in the system. So that's really easy. And let me just tell you, the embedded Power BI does not have any additional cost before you ask. But let's move on to another interesting one here. This one I've been looking so much forward to. You know that. So the mobile app. You can use the mobile app to do your expenses. It comes with OCR, meaning it reads your receipts. You can take photos of your receipts, and then you can do the expenses when you do have the time. You can, from the app, you can save the receipts, you can save the expense reports, you can submit, you can recall, You can also use it to approve expenses. If the app does not fit your needs, you can actually also change and customize the app according to your needs. So this is a good possibility. Let me show you, Ulrika, how we do it in the app. So first page we see is the front page. You can see I have 2 notifications here. That's because I have 2 approvals. I could change my legal entity because I know I hold employment in several legal entities. I have receipts here that I have been taking pictures of for later use. In the bottom you see there's the receipts. On the next pane there's the expenses where you do your expense lines. On the third there's the reports where you attach the expense lines. And you can see on the top, you can see the review and also the approved. And here is where you approve the expenses. Going back to the expenses, let's try to do one. So I click the blue plus, and now I just choose to use one of the existing receipts that I do have in the system. You know, Ulrika, you remember that day where we bought 2 gin? That's the one we are going to do. So
I don't remember the day after.
But let's do that one. And as you can see, it has already read the amount, the currency, the date, and it has even read the merchant. Where did we buy this? This is really nice. Now I fill out the expense category. This was a meal for us. We decided that's what we wanted to eat that day. Now I have added that, I get the possibility of adding a guest, because what would my manager say if I came with 2 bottles of gins and said that was my meal? So I pressed plus, and now I'm going to press plus again. I'm going to enter the guest name, being Ulrika. I am going to enter the company where Ulrika is from, which is, of course, the Viking ERP company. So I press, after I wrote the company name, I press done, save and add, and I have finished my, I will press done one more time here, and then I have finished my expense report, my expense line, so it's ready for the expense report anytime I'm ready for the expense report. That's really nice and convenient. You can see also it has a green expense updated successfully. Now it's there, ready to use. I want to do one more thing just to show you. I'm trying to add an expense without using a receipt. The category here will be car rental. I'm going to add $300. That's how much I spend on car rental. And once I have done that, I'm going to say done and say this is what I have for this expense. So what do you think will happen in the system, Ulrika? Now watch this. This is nice. One policy violation. I cannot submit it because there's a policy violation. I press the red policy violation to see what's actually wrong here. And on the top, I press view details to see what's wrong. And it tells me if I have an amount greater than $150, I need to make sure there's a receipt. So Ulrika, what do you think?
I think personally that it looks amazing. I don't know why all of the customers don't use this. But if there's still someone that's not persuaded, and if they maybe don't have a mobile phone, then let's see what they can do, Glona.
There's one thing I would like to add here. What do you think the cost of using the mobile app is, Ulrika?
Well, since I know the system, Lona, I know that this will only be a team member license. Is that right?
Yes, and compared to the other expense management apps, some of them require an amount for each expense report you send. Some of them require an amount for a percentage of the amount you send. But with this, you can actually send all the expense reports you want to, and it's only the team member license. This is really nice. We get people to send it right away. We get the instant visibility into our finance. Love it. So let's move on to talking about some of the concepts of the expense reports.
Thank you, Leona, because for those of you that don't have a mobile phone, I will actually do an expense report from within Dynamics as well, because you could do them there too. And before I do, let's talk a little bit again about those 3 concepts on an expense report. So the expense report itself is a collection of one or many expenses, and that is actually what we send in and what we get approved and what we in the end get reimbursed for. That's the expense report. Then we have the receipt, which is, of course, the uploaded picture. You saw it from Leone just now that she could add it from the app. And then we have the expense, which is a one-liner with a specified expense, such as a cost for a taxi fare. So we have those 3 concepts. And with those, I will show you how you can make a travel expense report and a travel. So let's now have a look. I'll go into the expense management workspace. And I go into an expense report that I've already created. It has 2 expense lines, one for the hotel, one for the flight, and those are expense lines. Then I can look at the receipts. Those are receipts that are already uploaded, and I can upload a new one from my computer just by pressing browse, or I can upload them using the app. They will be replicated here as well. Once I have them here, I can actually then attach them to an existing expense report. I get them over to my expense report, and here you see the receipt on that specific expense report. And then the final part would be adding a new expense. Maybe I have something more happening on that trip. So I add a new expense. I add a flight, add the amount. And the nice thing here is that I can actually add these expenses before doing the final report. And then in the end, once I'm ready with all of the expenses, I can just line them up all together, like here. I press the pre-done expense report, and I just choose to attach the expense that I just did. So I can actually be sitting at an airport, just adding maybe my line for the flight. And then finally, once I'm back home, done all of the traveling, I add them all together, like here on the expense report. Super simple and works perfectly, both from the app and from inside Dynamics.
This is amazing, Ulrika. I have to say, it is amazing. And now, the thing we have been waiting for.
It is truly the final thing in the system that we want to show today is something that we call, or Microsoft calls, the Audit workbench. You can use it to create internal audit policies. So here you can actually evaluate things like expense reports and then make sure they are within your company policy rules. So you can actually say, well, check if there's anyone that's been having the word alcohol in their expense reports. Now here, again, I think, Lona, you would be caught in those rules. Or you can actually check, is there an employee that has put in the same expense category with the same value twice, and maybe the same date twice within a certain range of time to make sure that we don't have any frauders within the organization. So this really simplifies also the work with the administration and the checks in the system. Don't forget this audit workbench. Super great tool, and also something that's a really hidden gem in the system, because Leone, couldn't you tell them you can actually use this for more, couldn't you?
Exactly. And you can just look at the screen. It's saying duplicate vendor invoices. How many times have you been reconciliating your vendors and finding a duplicate invoice, we can actually search it before that. Duplicate expenses, duplicate vendor invoices. It could also be the purchase requisitions that we are looking at. You can create policy rule types for more than one thing. You create a batch job that's running, and then you get notified if there's something that is not done according to your policy. This is truly a hidden gem in the system. What do you think, Ulrika? That's it for today. I cannot go more.
Well, no, I guess now we're all done for today. We just want to finish things off by saying thank you and soon opening up for any questions and answers. But thank you very much from both me and Lone, and to you that's been listening, and to DynamicsCon for actually having us here. It's been a real pleasure. And do you have any final words from your end, Lone, before we open up?
Just also thank you to the people that voted on us. We are so happy about it. We love to present together. It's always fun. Dynamics is not just work, it's fun. So take us away with your questions and we'll be ready.
Hi guys, so we're here for you and your questions.
I think, Ulrika, the first question came from Alexander, and he asked us, how are expense categories different from procurement categories? We use procurement categories for purchase orders, but how could we benefit from setting up expense categories?
Well, if you do expense reporting, that means that your employees send in the expenses related to their travels. When you do that with Dynamics, then you need to use the expense categories. The categories are coming from the shared category table, and then you tick them off and mark them as expense categories. Actually, you can also have them as project categories, but not as procurement. So, Lone, any other questions for us?
There was a question from Jonas on the different mileage rates based on the total mileage of an employee. And I think we actually did answer that one. So in Denmark, there's the limit of 20,000 kilometers in Denmark that you can drive and get the high rate for kilometers, and that can be set up in the system. So yes, we can support that. And the next question is from Anders. He's asking, unfair for Jonas to ask all of the questions. Any insights on time to implement? Any prerequisites that needs to be that we need to be aware of? Modules that need to be used, etc. So I think we can both reply a little to that, Ulrika. I know at least that one of my customers, when I was working at Microsoft last year, one of the big customers was starting up in June and had go live in August on the expense management. So it's a quick implementation. The customer already had finance and operations, so using the expense management module and setting up the expense categories, you could use the project management and accounting module also, as Ulrika said, if you want to use projects on your expenses. Anything you want to add, Ulrika?
No, again, we're back to, as we said, setting up the employee, the positions as well, if you want to have the approval flows flowing. And of course, you need to have some kind of finance backbone with the chart of accounts and the financial dimensions and the VAT.
Yeah, the simple is setting it up. Training of the users is the next, and that's probably taking longer time than setting it up, at least to my, yeah.
Exactly, and what you could do, you could actually start off with just adding one legal entity in one country and then adding on as you go. So you don't have to do a big bang with all of the legal entities at once.
And then we have a question. Do you know of any cases where expense management is used standalone? So if standalone means that you are using it without using any of the other features, then Microsoft is a really good answer to that one. Microsoft uses expense management, and Ulrika and I used expense management when we worked at Microsoft. It was combined with using another ERP system and another HR system. So it can be used. It can also be used with project operations. I know that my very, very good colleague and the best developer I know, Jonas, has some experience on that. So if you're interested in that, get back to us, and we will set you up with some people who knows about it. Yeah. Then there's another question from Denmark. Can it also handle the 60-day rule we have for driving to the same address in Denmark? The short answer is no. It would be a development if you need to do it. So doing the policies does not look into that table. So minor development for doing it, or usually it's taken care of with your payroll provider. In Denmark and Sweden, I think, and Norway also, a lot of companies use an ISV solution for payroll, and it might be that they are actually capable of doing that. So that would be something, if you want to hear more about it, reach out to Ulrika and me, and then we will try to find out the details and find a contact who can help on that. So here's a question for you, Ulrika. If the users have multiple transactions, multiple taxi rides, does the travel requisition need to have multiple transactions, or will the system total up all taxi rides and compare to the requisition line?
So it will total up. You can actually put in multiple expense reports, and it will count down and look at the remaining amount of the requisition. So you can put in multiple lines for the taxi ride.
Yes, we have more questions coming in, Ulrika. It's amazing. Can you set it up so that the description field on the transaction is taken from the description field? No, once again. Can you set it up so that the description field on the transaction is taken from the description field from the expense report header, or from the international note from the expense line? That's a question I am not sure of. Do you know that, Ulrika?
No, not from the top of my head. Sorry.
No, we need to get back on that one.
Yeah.
Then we have someone saying thank you. One's asking, is there a 60-day rule that prevents adding any expense? Mileage in the UK is 10,000 miles at one rate, and then it actually changes from 10,000 miles, and that can be set up. So whoever asked that question, let me see, Martin asked me, and that can I'll tell you how to set that up. That can be set up in the system. We used it, as I said, also in Denmark. From 20,000 kilometers, we changed the rate, so that's a standard setup. Someone is asking, is there a battle card that compares Dynamics expenses against Concur? There might be that some places, but it's not something we have. I think the best thing we can say is that it can actually do all the things that we can also do in Concur, and the things needed. And with only the team member license, it's very beneficial for customers to do. And I know from my work at the German enterprise market that a lot of the bigger customers are actually using the expense management in Dynamics. Even though also they might use Concur, they are choosing to use the expense management from Dynamics because maybe the functionalities, the price they are paying for it already, because they use finance as finance system.
Yeah, I think, Lona, we need to wrap up because we're out of time. Is there anything else, or otherwise, I guess we need to say thank you so much to the crowd.
There are two more questions. Can we make them, or can I change the language in the app to Danish? do the header fields you see in the app come from the header fields you have selected to be visible in the report in the workspace. So another round of another session is coming up. Reach out to Ulrika and me, and we will be very happy to help you on it. You can find us on LinkedIn and reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.